is not to come out with concrete, absolutely word for word. We're not looking for motions here that, are suitable for, discussion at a council table. We're looking for some general themes. So let's not get caught up in specific words, but let's really focus on what are the general themes that we would like to do. And when we started this morning, I'd sort of proposed, based on the input that has been provided to me by the committee, that kind of angling it towards powers, and someone suggested that maybe policies would be a better use of the term, so let's call it powers and policies. So that we'll just call over here powers and policies. And then the other folks said it could be process and procedure, so of course over here we'll put PP as well, and that will avoid any confusion to what side we're talking about, right? It's now good afternoon, by the way. So there you go. So let's call this process. And by the way, don't ever try to figure out what I'm writing here. There's no point in it because I can't read my own writing. We have some note takers here, so your comments are going to be captured. And also, the folks who did take the notes, we're going to ask that they hand them in to one of the committee members. So all of the good information, even if it doesn't get shared and discussed in detail here today, will still be captured. So don't fear that all of your good work won't be put to good use. Now, we're going to just go through each group and ask for the person from that group to stand up, the mic, and Marilyn Iafredi is going to be the start to sort of set us off our way. I'm going to try to capture the information here, and again, the intent is to capture it so that you kind of go, oh right, we discussed that. One thing I want to make sure, all too often when I do a group like this, someone will get up and they will say, well, all of our points have already been covered, and they feel that therefore their points shouldn't be repeated. Now, I would agree they don't need to be repeated in the same level of detail if it's been covered, but if it was an important point to you and you don't say that was one of our important points, then we don't recognize that two groups had a similar outcome. So even if someone's already covered the point of view, please make sure you say, you know what, we agree with that, put an extra tick mark beside that one so that we all acknowledge that, because that's how we start to develop some themes and consensus. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. So, Marilyn, you're first up, so why don't you share your 2 or 3 or even short 4 key issues.
Thank you very much, and I do want to thank the team that worked with us. You guys were fabulous, had great ideas, and thank you for helping me write these out, because it was getting a little convoluted. First and foremost, the most important thing that because we came up with about 8 recommendations, but we tried to narrow down the ones that were most important. The first one was that our recommendation was that amendments to an approved official plan are not subject to an OMB appeal, period.
Okay.
The next one was, our recommendation was to provide sufficient funding, that sufficient funding be provided to the OMB to include experts/planners assigned to facilitate and support citizen participation. The example here we were calling them planning aid, very much like legal aid.
Okay.
Then we also recommended that new appointees to the OMB should be skilled in legal and planning with some municipal political experience. Are you writing fast enough?
Oh, you go ahead.
Okay, all right. And that their caseloads be assigned appropriately based on their expertise. And since I have the mic, I'm going to throw in a 4th one.
Oh, does that come as a surprise to me?
And this one I thought was it was very important as well. That an order for mediation by the OMB should not be considered optional, so it should be mandatory, and that it should be a first step in the OMB process. And those are our 4. Thank you.
Okay, who's next?
Who's next? We'll bring the mic over to you. Looks like we've got a waggling hand over here. Excellent.
Where are we here? This gentleman right here? Okay. Okay.
And would you be kind enough just to introduce yourself, just name and where your city you're from or town?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nicholas Ameta, Councillor, Ward 8, City of Cambridge, North Galt. It's great to be here. I'd also like to introduce our Councillor, Jan Liggett, as well, who's from Cambridge. And we had a few others who are here as well, who I think had to leave a bit early for other commitments. But anyways, some of the points that we came up with, we'd like to change the 180 days. Or at least like maybe for less complex applications, and when it comes to the more controversial ones, whether they're like a controversial plan of subdivision or if they involve a number of government agencies, that we allow an option to extend the 180 days for that.
So you're saying to change it to be longer, or an option to be longer?
Possibly either to change it to be longer, or we keep the 180 days, but we have an option to get an extension if it meets certain criteria.
Okay.
We also talked too about giving the individual municipalities more authority to implement the provincial decisions. We agree with the intensification, but there's different ways to do it for each community, and we'd like the council to have a greater say in that regard. And heritage preservation came up a lot since we had representatives from Stratford, Cambridge, Markham, Richmond Hill, Niagara and the Lake, which are all very well known for their heritage. And we talked about the rural municipalities as well, how urban issues are different than rural issues, and that the OMB should have greater consideration to the rural needs of a municipality.
So more appreciation about the differences between the municipalities, could we say that?
Yes.
Like, really understand the differences. Okay,
I'll pass the mic on to you.
who's next? We got someone-
Actually, we're in the same group because we're a collaborative group,
We are.
which I think was good.
We're
So
trying
that
to cover all the points.
that doesn't get you around the policy of 3 to 5 things here. We'll have to go to an OMB hearing to find out.
That's why we wanted to
to.
extend the number of days. Actually, I think Nicholas has covered most of it. We did talk about the question about whether the OMB should be abolished or not. And I think there was a fairly general consensus that something similar to, if not in many ways similar to the OMB, is still necessary. We did talk a little bit about it being a sober second thought when council is making a less than good decision, which sometimes apparently happens. Not in Richmond Hill, but or in Cambridge, sorry. Okay, and I think the other thing that Nicholas touched on a little bit too is that we did recognize the fact that there are matters that make communities unique, such as heritage, that at the present time the OMB is clearly not taking into full enough consideration, and that the uniqueness of communities gets eroded when that type of thing happens. And I think that, the other thing that came up that I thought was interesting with regard to the 180-day time frame was that there are lots of situations where different municipalities are dealing with more than one type of body, not just the municipality, but the M&R, Niagara Escarpment Commission, and so on and so forth, which makes it much more complicated, and therefore probably consideration of that needs to be taken into account when the OMB is involved. And I think that's it.
All right.
Okay, so we were in the Canada
Well, we
room.
should give a little applause
Oh,
first
applause,
before we
yeah.
move on. Yes? A little self-recognition. So, yes.
For me or for what they said?
Well,
No.
you'll get you'll have to earn
I'll take
yours.
mine
They did a
after.
great job. Now you will too.
I'm Yvonne Fernandez. I'm from the city of Kitchener. And so we were, Kathy and I from city of Guelph were with the Red Group. And we had a really very engaging discussion, and there were definitely some different opinions. But what some of the things we did agree on was official plans approved by the province not to be challenged at the OMB. C of A, not to go to the OMB, that some kind of a local appeal body or group should be considered And I guess it would really depend on the size of the community and the ability to have that separate independent body. 2 was the scoping of appeals are required with the ability to deny hearing. So there seems to be some confusion around whether the OMB has the ability to deny a hearing. There was a bit of a uncomfortableness from some of the people around the table about this, saying that by doing that, that the appellant's case may not become heard, or that some kind of a secret court could ensue. So there was a little bit of concern about that, so I have to state that. Number 3, that dispute resolution and mediation be brought back earlier in the process, and we've heard that already a couple of times. So mediation be an absolute. We have to start doing more of that. And the qualifications of the OMB members, we heard that as well from other groups. Definitely an important issue. We did also discuss about the timing and how important it was that I think one of the members from Burlington, yes, was saying that without the proper scoping and the ability for a municipality to scope out the work, that having our backs against a wall because of the timing makes it very difficult and challenging. Did I reflect that properly? Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Alan Sheffman, City of Vaughan. I was with the Atrium Group. First of all, a basic principle was suggested, and the principle is that the OMB should reflect the existing mature professional planning environment in Ontario municipalities. So that was a principle that we...
So is that sort of into this kind of category of thought as well, as it's really speaking to the qualifications of the people on the board?
No, it's not about the board,
Okay.
the qualifications of the people on the board, it's the board itself. And the point that was made is that in 1906, there weren't a lot of professional planners around. There might, I don't know if there are any around. But the fact is now, virtually every municipality has planning capacity at a professional level. So the idea of the board itself should reflect the mature professional planning environment in the province at municipal level as a fundamental issue.
Okay.
Okay. I don't know where that fits on your board. So some of the things that we've suggested in our group, that there is a need to create a step prior to the OMB after a decision is made by a council. That is, the idea was that there should be some means to help resolve those differences that remain that would lead to an appeal, and there should be a public facilitated process to try to resolve these things before they go to the OMB.
So is that sort of into that mediation second step?
Well, no, mediation
Okay.
is another issue we
Another
mentioned.
issue, okay, so-
We identified mediation being something that we wanted to enhance, expand, whatever, without any further sort of discussion around what that might look like. The idea of raising the bar, that is, raising the bar to allow appeal, was discussed. And so the idea was to restrict the types of issues that may be appealed to the OMB, such as the types of things that shouldn't go would be minor variances that have already been heard by Committee of Adjustment, perhaps site plans. Again, the list could be developed as we move towards recommendations. The issue of cost for municipalities and residents was an issue that was brought up, and we need to look at means to address the issue of costs. One suggestion was that the appellant pay the entire cost for the hearing. I like that one. And then further to when should appeals be allowed, one of the suggestions was when one act of the province contravenes another in the course of the issues in appeal, such as environment, aggregates, heritage. When there are those sorts of conflicts built into an appeal, then it should go to OMB. And also another recommendation is when council decision is different than the staff recommendation was made by members in that group. Couple of final ones. Yeah, it was a suggestion to create, if it's possible, some type of some sort of an advisory function for the OMB, not just decision making, but looking at a advisory function to help towards resolving differences. I guess it's not mediation, which is a different process, but it's using the expertise that may be available at OMB to help provide advice that will help resolve these sorts of issues. The issues relating to the time issue of the 180 days, as has been mentioned, and then administrative issues, the time to get a hearing, the time it takes for a hearing to take place, and the staffing issues relating to availability of hearing dates. So the three are sort of connected. One of the problems with the OMB right now is they're very understaffed. So it's very tough to get a hearing date, and then you have hearing times that take a long time, and then before you get your report back is another time
So
gap.
you guys didn't really have time to clear them down to your top three, right?
No, we really didn't. We were all
Okay.
over the map, but
All right.
we had so many good ideas.
And
This group was brilliant.
it just had to
No,
be
you
said.
don't clap for the group.
Very good. Who's next? Over here.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. My name is Pat Malloy. I'm Deputy Mayor in the Township of Uxbridge, and if you don't mind a little shameless plug, we have our mayor here today, Garrett O'Connor, and Councillor Hyatt, Barton and Beach, and Regional Councillor Jack Ballinger. That's 6 out of 7 of our councillors here today.
So
So
later we'll go by each chair and you can
that's-
introduce
yeah, okay.
yourself.
You got to remember the names when you go around the room. I had the opportunity to facilitate our group with Mary Ann from Welland. And if you don't mind me doing one other little plug, and I know it's probably not the time to do this, but we've been going through this process for a few months now with the committee, and they've done a fantastic job, and thank them all. But I think I really want to thank Tom and Michael, because I've watched these guys work so hard for the last few months. And I asked Tom when someone was going to thank him today. He didn't want one. So anyway, thank you, Tom and Michael. I know how hard you guys worked on this, so thank you. We have quorum.
It's a good thing the press didn't notice that. We'd be in
Yeah,
trouble.
We weren't in the same room, okay? Just very quickly, I'll go through a few of these if you don't mind. We had a great group, lots of input, pretty hard to nail 3 one-liners down. Everybody's from different areas, different issues, different geography, everything's different. But we managed to come up with a couple that are pretty straightforward. One of them, of course, is we don't believe official plans should be appealable. We agree with that. One of the other ones was, we talked a little bit about then what else should be appealable. We went through sort of committee of adjustment decision, went through minor variances. It's so complicated, we really couldn't define it down to what should or where we should be drawing the line, or to who. So I guess the other one is we do support more resources for the OMB. We want to increase the timely decision-making process they have. And one of the suggestions was that we sort of create a level of service that's expected from the OMB. You know, we all talked about the length of time we wait for our decisions and that sort of thing. So perhaps some more resources would help that. A good suggestion, I thought was a great suggestion, was that planning should be local. The planning decision should be kept local, and even to the extent that a local OMB member might even be appropriate, particularly for some of the areas that are further north as opposed to everything as we know is in the south. But for some of the more northern communities, it would be more appropriate if an OMB member was more familiar with the area that they're making decisions about. And I think that's it. Anyway, that was our group. Anyway, thank you very much.
Is that all the groups? Everybody's had their, is anybody sitting there in a group and they're saying, where'd my moderator facilitator go? They're out to lunch or something? Okay, so with that in mind, folks, I want to try to open the floor up a little bit. What I don't want is, can we avoid the introducing everybody in your council when we get up to speak this time? Yeah. Well, apparently so, yeah. And with respect, you know, let's not get too detailed into your own personal situations, because I think that I'll come to you, yes. You know, that we all know we have some issues, so unless it's specifically to edify us on an element. But what I've seen so far, and certainly jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, but here are some of the themes that you can see I've circled that I seem to feel were repeated. So number one, the whole issue of the strength, power, and validity of your official plans. There seems to be a recognition as folks, we take the time to go through a process to develop an official plan, we go through public consultation, we spend years developing it, and we feel, and again, this is not my opinion and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think I'm hearing, we feel like sometimes the OMB just kind of ignores it. Is that a theme that you guys believe is consistent across the board? Is that can we call this sort of theme 1? Theme 2 that I heard was there's a resourcing issue and I've used resourcing because, you know, somebody said dollars and someone said people, but they're all resources in one way, shape, or form. And so what I think I heard were things like, you know, we want to make sure that there are experts on the board and that some of those experts are made available to people who need that support, almost like that legal aid situation we talked about. Making sure that there is some citizen participation in that. So if a citizen wants to be involved in the process, they don't become completely overwhelmed by the legalities of the process. And then the other one, you know, sort of in the similar area, like providing an advisory function. So my sense is it tends to level the playing field instead of it's being a developer with all the dollars and all the expertise against even a municipality just can't functionally fight against that. Is that a second theme that you folks are suggesting that need to be dealt with? Yeah? Third area, the OMB members themselves. A level of expertise that you might feel is not quite where it needs to be. And interestingly enough, you know, do they actually need real municipal experience? And why? Why do they need that? Because, so that they understand the pressures a municipal politician faces, or because they have actually set on the table? What's the thinking behind that? Feet on the ground.
Seeing something from the other side instead of just focused on the one side. They actually have a perspective from the other side.
So they feel a little bit about what you guys are experiencing in terms of building your communities.
And the residents are feeling.
And the residents are feeling. Yes?
I'm from Burlington. I think part of the issue is that all development applications, when they get to the board and even the council, are site-specific. We want to move, our official plan is a comprehensive plan. So we decide where does someone said it earlier on the panel, I thought was a great point. We've already decided where intensification should go, where apartments should go, and where it shouldn't. But then somebody brings around the side of that a site-specific, wow. Site-specific application, and then you're down to talking about numbers. You're not talking about vision, you're not talking about community, you're not talking about an overall plan. And they say, well, you know, if it's going to be 10 anyway, why not make it 20? We have to get around that at the OMB so that they're required to look at how that one specific site fits into the entire plan.
Right, so that kind of ties into the official plan issue, is that you've already looked at the
We've
big
already looked at
picture.
the site.
They just pull out a little piece and they evaluate it without the context of the bigger picture, which means that official plan has to have more strength when it comes to it. I will come to you, but this young lady here had suggested that she wanted to speak early, and I neglected, so I'll go there and then I'll go here.
Thank you, Barbara DeBreen from Southgate. I wanted to question what the first group, Marilyn, I believe, meant by amendments to the official plan should not be appealable. I support, and our group supported, that the official plan should not be appealable, which it currently isn't, and which currently is supported, anyway, however that is. But if we make an amendment to an official plan,
So that being we, the municipal council.
The municipal council
right?
makes, the planner comes and they recommend that we make a revision to the official plan, amendment to the official plan to allow this particular development, and a resident or someone else decides that they want to appeal that. Like, that's an amendment to an official plan that went
So
through
let's
that whole
ask
process.
Marilyn,
So
what was-
could they clarify that,
Yeah.
please?
What was your team thinking?
Okay, we were just simply thinking.
Do we need the mic going back and forth, just out of interest?
I don't know. We can
We're okay without the mic?
All right, and group butt in anytime, okay, if I've got this wrong. I think we're both talking about the same thing, really, because the city or the municipality normally wouldn't come, I don't, at least in our 5 years that we've had an approved plan, we have not come forward with an amendment to our own plan. The only people that come forward with that is the development community. So we're saying if that plan is approved and you're coming in with an amendment, and if we, maybe we made a mistake. I mean, our plan was massive. I found some errors in our plan before we finalized it, even though it kind of got approved back in 2010. So if you're fixing something, I get it, because you want to meet the intent of the original plan. But if you're just coming in and where you're supposed to have low-rise residential and you want to put 30-story towers, you're making an amendment to the plan, and we say no, it shouldn't be going to the board for an appeal, because you've got to stick to the plan. That's
Okay.
all we're saying, stick to the
Think
plan.
that's clear, yep. I saw a hand here and then one over here, but let's go here. Yes?
I was just going to comment about the composition of the board.
The board, yes, we were kind of in there for
Yeah,
a
we
bit.
were in there, and I think it's very important that the board members be impartial, but have experience. And one of the things that came up in our session is being familiar with municipal planning, but also municipal decision-making at large reminds us that even though the OMB or whatever the new body is looking at planning issues, that the people that are making the decisions are making decisions in the context of a lot of other regulations and considerations, like the Heritage Act, transportation, and a number of
Right.
even social services, like you name it. So they need to be impartial, but they also need to have, I would say, extensive experience in the municipal decision-making process and all the factors that go into it.
So another way, if I could, I mean, and I'm not suggesting they shouldn't have municipal experience, but in a broader scale, you're suggesting they need to have a broader perspective than simply the planning elements of it. They need to bring in some of the other aspects of the decision-making process that a municipal person does have.
Exactly. Unless the new body has its scope reined in, that it's very, very specific, then you don't need that. But as the OMB sits right now,
Right.
it's quite often making decisions on planning that have all of these other factors
They're in a vacuum.
rolled into it. It's not they're acting in a vacuum when it's not a vacuum.
Yes,
If we want
got
to
it.
create the vacuum, absolutely, but otherwise
Perfect.
not.
Thank you. Who was up, this young lady here first, and then you, sir?
I think it's important also that, the people that are making the decision at the OMB have municipal experience, because these are decisions that affect real people's daily lives. And when you just think of a development that goes into an older neighborhood with a large number of new homes, just the transportation problems alone that affect real people. So I think they need to be aware of all those things that we have to make a decision when what we base our decisions on.
Other comments about the OMB members? Let's stick with this area first, and then we'll come back. This gentleman and then this young lady here. Everybody's a gentleman and a young lady, by the way. I don't know if you've noticed.
Thank you, young man. I appreciate that.
Nice.
I just wanted to reiterate in somewhat the comments by the young council member over there with the dark hair, gender unspecific. No, keep going. Yeah. I think that one of the really important issues here for me is that we have professionalized the OMB, and I think that we need to be mindful that lawyers tend to talk to lawyers, planners talk to lawyers, planners talk to planners, and one of the real needs here is a number of generalists who have a familiarity with people as opposed to professions, because this is one, from my way of thinking, this makes the OMB very arcane for the average individual. I liken it in some ways. Somebody had reckoned that it was similar to the Supreme Court, and I disagree. I think it's similar to the Senate. There are a number of people that are making a number of decisions on a number of things, and quite often they don't have the expertise to do that, but we trust them with that. Everybody in this room is a member of a council somewhere, and we did not have to write an exam to do that. And it is the same with building communities. I don't discount the need for professional standing in some areas, but I absolutely want to put at a premium the need to understand what community is as well. That's one of the things that's fundamental in missing from the OMB. My own view is I'd like to get rid of the bloody thing, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah,
So
okay.
let's try to bring it back to people.
Right, so people first, right? And now we were going over here, and then we'll go to you, sir, and then up to you.
Where are we going?
Over here?
Okay.
Is this mic able to be worked? Can we get that one working? We'll have 2 mics going. That would be awesome.
Thank you. So we mentioned the urban and the rural areas that need representation because they have different sensitivities, I guess. I'm French, so I'll try to translate what I'm thinking. So I think there should also be a regional representation on the board to represent the different regions and the different there might be unofficial plans and for the decisions that would benefit the board. I don't know if there is currently regional representation. No, eh?
No?
No?
I don't know. I'm the dummy at the front. You guys would know.
No.
But it sounds like no, right?
Because we're under the impression, I'm from Township of Russell, just east of Ottawa. It's a rural area. And when we talk about the OMB, it's like, all the people from Toronto making these decisions about us, our little township that they've never stepped foot in. So,
Right.
We feel that if we had someone there that knows the riding, knows the area, it would be beneficial.
Yeah, and that was sort of touched on here about the fact that the local understanding, and I'd written down a local appeal group is necessary. So that was, I think, came up in the context of Committee of Adjustments, which would now normally go to OMB for appeal, that there needs to be sort of you don't have to go to the big Ontario-wide thing. There should be something at a regional level that seems to be more sensitive to the regional issues than purely looking at it from the Planning Act in black and white on a desk somewhere in downtown Toronto. Who is next? Yes, sir.
Let's go with Karen first.
Oh, we're going to go with Karen. You've been usurped by a young lady with a mic, but we'll get to you.
Couldn't get to you quick enough.
Thank you. I'm surprised that no one's talked about hearing de nouveau, because one of the issues that our city solicitors have is that when an application goes to the OMB, they don't take a look at what the council did. They don't take a look at the staff recommendation. I think Leo touched on 2.2 point something that they're supposed to, but our city solicitors say that the hearing starts brand new and from fresh, and they don't take into consideration what we've done here at the city.
I know that's not spelled right, but it's a good Italian restaurant, but it's appeal versus de novo. So, yes. Is that surprised that that didn't come up more often in some of your groups? Did it come up in your groups? So that's what you were, okay, all right. So I'm going to just move that restaurant over here to no de novo, just to keep a reference there. Okay, good, thank you. No, this gentleman has been waiting, sir, but we'll get the mic to him. This gentleman here is next, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. I want to touch base on the aspect of qualifications, and I think it's extremely important of that. I've been a planner for 30 years. I've been a consultant for another half a dozen years and a politician for half a dozen years. So I've been around the
So you're
block.
about 25, 30 years old now?
Yeah, you're approaching that, a little less than half a century. But anyways, I've also been at the board hearing many times representing municipalities as well as consultants and developers. So I see the expertise, or sometimes the lack of expertise. So I feel strongly that any member on the board listening to a hearing should be well qualified, being a planner or a legal background, with municipal political or municipal or regional, political background, somehow involved in whatever their, work led them to. So to me, it's a highly recommended qualification needed. It's just like in the legal system. I mean, you're a lawyer first, and then you qualify and become a judge afterwards based on your qualifications and years of involvement in in law. So
Very good.
same thing should happen in the planning field.
Okay, thank you. Sir, you were next.
Mark Burnham, Tay Valley Township. I think the appeal versus de novo is really important. We did discuss it in our group. It didn't come up as part of the thing. But I think personally, I'm of the opinion it should simply be an appeal. If it's the start of a brand new hearing, that negates all the public meetings, all the other stuff.
Right.
And if it doesn't have to do with an OP, if it has to do with the zoning bylaw amendment, or which is where our OMB hearings usually come from, then you want it to be an appeal of the process. If we've chosen to ignore our official plan or our zoning bylaw, then the applicant has every right to appeal it.
So that makes it much more truly a check and balance. It's like, you know, the power has been appropriately delegated down to the municipality, and only if they don't step up and do their job appropriately, and there can be arguments about that, but, you know, if the fundamental is they've missed something or they didn't pay attention to something, then we have the appeal. Yeah. Is that what I'm hearing from folks? Is there sort of a general positive feel? So here's what I'm seeing so far. We've got the critical element of the official plan. We've talked about how, you know, what's involved in that process. We've talked about making sure that there's resources for the OMB and that those resources are well used by having the right people there in place. We've talked a little bit about I'm going to call it, for lack of a better term, the conflict of provincial policy and the various provincial policies and how they kind of create a little bit of a mess for you guys to work your way through. And so we talk about local issues having a priority, sort conflicts in the acts. Anybody got any idea what I wrote there? More power to municipality to implement the provincial policies. So the provincial policies are there, give us the opportunity to work on them in the context of a well thought through official plan that has all the right steps in it. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 so far. Before we move over here, is there anything else in those 4 that you think points need to be still brought forward? Yes.
Just on the resourcing, I think it's really, oh, sorry.
I could hear you. I don't care about the rest of them.
On the resourcing, I think that point was specific to having resources for public engagement and ability to participate in OMB. There was also discussion around resourcing the OMB itself to make sure they can get to appeals faster and so forth. But I think the issue about resourcing on that side of it will be taken care of entirely if we limit the number of things they have to deal with. I am not on for giving the OMB way more money and way more adjudicators. I don't think we need it if we get to number 1.
Right.
So
Gotcha.
there's 2 sides of that resourcing. I'm totally in support of allowing resources to help the public engage the OMB. That was how I heard it in the first place. Just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, no, and I think that's fair. As I just wrote the word appropriate there. And so there's one solution, theoretically, throw a ton of money at the OMB so they can move faster. That's not the solution. We're saying put some money towards, making sure that folks who need the support, let's just call it need the support, and secondly, start to streamline what's going on so we don't need as many people there. We can move it through faster, more efficiently, with the focus on the right things. Am I capturing that okay? Yes? All right, you've got a mic, so you can go first, but this young lady here is going to have a mic in a moment, Dawn. Go ahead, sir.
I agree with Burlington. I think that if we, that's not a good message to be sending out from this unless we have that clarification, so thank you. I would also say one of the things that is problematic that we haven't talked about, I don't think, on the list very much is the 180-day thing.
I'm going to come to that, but
Okay.
So I'm going to hold you off.
Okay.
And I make a note, we're going to come back to you, sir. Give up your mic now, though. Yes, ma'am.
So I was going to make a comment in terms of municipalities being able to implement provincial policy.
Yes.
I think that it may be just playing with words here, but I think the municipalities have to be given the opportunity to interpret provincial policy in the context of their local conditions and to implement that policy accordingly, especially since some of these policies are contradictory and we have different acts at play. So it's not just implementation of the policy, it's also interpretation of the policy in the context of our own local needs. And so that links back to
that would
having-
lead into the official plan, correct?
Yeah, so our official plan, should, the provincial policy, like we said, it's messy and it's broad and it's contradictory, and we get to interpret it in the context of our communities within our official plan, and that should be respected, right?
Yeah.
And that we should be given the right to do so.
And the check and balance for that is getting your official plan approved, right? Is that making sense? So give us the ability to take all these things into consideration as we go through the process of the official plan. The check and balance to make sure that we've looked at it appropriately is we got that approved. Once it's approved, then leave it alone and then let us develop our communities according to that approved official plan. Am I hearing that right? Yes, ma'am. Young lady, I should have said. My apologies.
I only got called young lady when I was in trouble.
Well, maybe you'll
Maybe
be in
I'll
trouble.
get in trouble. I have the mic now. Okay, I just, with the exception of Burlington, I don't see the big boys here. And it's just something that looks a little common. This is a room full of, for the most part, small municipalities. And I think that is...
Define big boys.
Oh, well, I guess Markham is big too. But there's
Well,
a
they
lot
think
of
they're big.
smaller municipalities
Yes.
here.
Is anybody here from Toronto?
North of 401.
Okay, sorry.
There were supposed to be 3 councillors from Toronto that could confirm. Unfortunately, I don't know why they're not.
Well, they probably heard the weather. What happened there? They heard the weather, and they closed the gardener, so they couldn't get out. They figured it would be snowing north of 7. But so there were some invited. They confirmed, and they didn't show.
Okay, but for the that's fine.
But it's a fair comment. It's a fair
No,
comment.
but can I finish that
Yeah.
comment? So for the most part, though, it seems like it's smaller municipalities, smaller rural municipalities that have a little bit of a different growth and vision and hindrance, be it the green belt or other pressures. So I think maybe there has to be 2 tiers with the OMB. I really do. I think they need to treat the smaller rural municipalities a little bit different and put us in a little bit of a different box than the big urban. We're different.
Well, young lady, I have an opinion about that. No. All right, so that's a recognition of the localized issues. And I think to some degree that falls under this bigger point of allowing the municipalities to deal with it in the context of their local business. Sorry. But yeah, so is there a sense that the big boys, for lack of a better term, and the smaller municipalities need a different set of rules, or is it they need a different process, or like, so let's take that thought for a moment and extend it. What does that actually look like? Yes.
Well, I think these are real issues today. I think there really are perhaps 2 or 3 or even 4 different very distinctly different types of municipalities. There's the larger urban municipalities. I'm in one. We have 320,000. Yeah, in Vaughan. There's the rural municipalities, small communities with all sorts of planning issues. There's the northern municipalities, which is a whole other kettle of fish. And obviously, I don't think anybody from the north is here. So, there is.
From, ma'am?
Oh, great. Well, good for you. Yeah, okay, that's good. No, that's great.
For coming down.
And I'm sure you could talk about your distinctiveness, and I think as you go further north, there's even more distinctiveness. So I think that's one of the things we really need to think about in our recommendations. We get to that point of perhaps different bodies, different sets of rules, a different approach that are more respectful of the different issues in our different types of municipalities. No question.
So I've just got I'm sort of tying it for now, and again, remember, we're not really working on words here. I'm just trying to gather some themes here. But what I've sort of tied together is uniqueness of municipalities, local appeal group necessary, but the sense that everything doesn't have to come to the OMB. Everything doesn't have to come to just one sort of, this is the way it is, but we need to be able to look at things through a slightly different lens that seems to be more reflective of the actual communities. That's why they did the official plans in the first place. So let's make sure that whatever this group does, this skilled, even more skilled members of the OMB, that they're really looking at it through the lens of someone within that community. Is that fair? Okay, I've got a mic up here and a mic here. You guys can fight it out. Let me know.
Mine will be brief. There's one word that showed up in our discussions that hasn't been raised in this room, and that is triage. There should be very early triage, and there should be summary judgments. Rather than going through the whole process, there should be an early assessment as to the merits of the case.
So that's sort of where I was thinking here, is that there needs to be sort of an element of evaluation before it goes to OMB. And I know I heard earlier today something about frivolous and vexatious, et cetera, but I get the sense it's broader than just that. It needs to be, look, we can fix this or we can solve this a little bit differently. Maybe we can, when we come to, we can talk about that in the context of mediation as well. This gentleman.
Yeah, I actually would just say when it comes to the OMB, that local planning matters should be dealt at the local level, and the OMB should be keeping out of that equation altogether. Where I see the OMB playing a role would be strictly in terms of reasonableness of process, ensure that the process was done properly, it was done publicly, and it was in accordance with the official plan that were approved by the province. And after that, stay out of our business. It's what I would say.
Okay. Hey, oh, there you go. Round of applause. Here, here. Okay, so quick summary. We've kind of covered some things here. I want to move over into this area now, if I could. I'll come to you, sir. You want to speak to this side first, or are you going to open up another?
What I want to speak to is the issue of whether or not we need different people for different sized municipalities.
At the OMB?
Yes.
Okay. So that was somewhat covered, and I think good to be reinforced is the concept of regional and municipal having that kind of experience. And then we've also got, we can talk about it in the context of local appeal groups and recognizing the uniqueness of the communities. Does that sort of fit under that broad umbrella?
Okay, I come from a small rural community. What I would like to have from the OMB is a person who has a clear understanding of the issue that has come before that person. And so if it were well scoped, well described, and the objector was able to present substantive reason for the objection,
right,
then it really doesn't matter to me who chairs it, as long as the chair understands that the decision has to be made on the basis of all the facts that were before the council at the time the decision was made.
So that's that localized knowledge about the area, for sure.
Well, it doesn't necessarily have to have prior municipal experience. It just has to be an understanding that you don't get to start from squares one. You have to start from where the decision was made that's being
appeal
appealed.
versus de novo.
Yep.
Right. Got it. So I think we've got that, right? Comfortable with that? When we talk about the process, we've talked a little bit about both time, the 180 days, and we've also talked about a variety of different influences on the process. We've heard about, potentially local groups, as in it just doesn't get sent to the big board, the Ontario board, but there needs to be people with some localized expertise. And we've talked about you know, do we have a step of evaluation, or triage was the word that was used, before it even goes to OMB, to get rid of more than just the vexatious and frivolous ones, but to really kind of look at it. And some people had said that meditation might be good too, but mediation should be mandatory first step. So that's not quite what Tony was referring to, a mediation, but it was a first step that before. So there seems to be some sense that there needs to be an interim step before we go to a full OMB hearing to try to deal with some of the other issues, assuming, of course, we get the right issues going forward anyway. What's the thoughts on that? Sir?
Process is key to just about everything that we're going to do, because the OMB has a process, municipalities are supposed to have a process, and that those steps have to be followed one after another, lockstep, so that once the process plays out, it makes it easier to find a final decision. I'd like to add one other thing, something that our community has done, and done quite successfully, that might fit into the process of other small communities. We're 62% rural, lots of grapes, we do a lot of farming. We've added a pre-planning meeting to the entire process, where the developer shows up in a room and talks about what he or she wants to do and lets people listen. It's ahead of the entire planning process. There's no planning act involved. And believe it or not, it's worked miracles in our community. And it might be something that the rest of Ontario might want to think about as well. Many probably already are. And it's ahead of everything. It brings people together. It lets people listen. And, you know, those who show up who are completely dead set for things find out that people don't agree with them. And the other way works as well. And then they sit down with our planners and say, okay, well, if you want this thing to go forward, what are you going to change? Yeah. Okay. So just an idea.
Just a previous step. What are we doing for time here, by the way?
4 minutes.
Who said 4 minutes? No, so first of all, let me just do a quick, so it's currently 3 o'clock, which was, I think, the official closing time. Do you folks want to give it some more time here? And if so, are we looking at another 15 minutes, a half hour? What would you like to do? Because I don't want to keep you any longer than you would like to be here.
Oh, I'm out of here.
15? Check back in 15, shall we? Okay, so someone give me the high sign. All right, so who is next? Yes, sir.
I've got the mic here. I just like to say, if we go with number one, which is,
number them.
well, you can now. The important one, which there is no appeal if they've approved the official plan, then I think we don't need to worry about a lot of the other stuff because it'll sort itself out. If they're just allowed to have for errors in law,
right?
That's totally different. But if it's an error in law and process, that would be the only times they can go to the OMB.
So that's a pretty specific recommendation, and let's not get too caught up in the words, but what I'm hearing is that anything that goes to the OMB should be based on appeal versus de novo.
Absolutely.
So that's pretty clear direction. So Mr. McMeekin can walk away and say, okay, I got clear specifics on that one. Are we good there?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Other comments? Young lady. We need a mic for this young lady. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, and yes, let's do other young lady.
I'm just going to be quick. Yes, if they're required only on if we make the rule, then that's great. But one of the things about process is you have a very long, complicated process when it's regular stuff that comes to council. But that committee of adjustment thing, there's basically committee of adjustment and then it leapfrogs without all of that other process involved. So something within this process has to deal with those issues that get quickly leapfrogged past anything that's in between and that become just a complete pain, frankly, when we don't have any sort of council open houses, pre-consultation, anything else like that. We do have those small number of times that we're going to need something in between just because of the process itself.
Right. got it, absolutely.
Yes, I would just like to reinforce what was said over there about a pre-planning public meetings with the community on issues coming forward. And we do it too, and it works very well. So I want to reinforce that, but that wasn't why I took the mic. When you were talking about committees of adjustment and land division and stuff like that, and on your notes, I think you have it that it would, if there's an appeal on something like that, perhaps it would not go to the OMB, but go to a local group or something of that nature. But I don't see why it wouldn't go back to the council itself, because it was not the council who actually did the assessment. The council will not have seen that issue.
Is it on a committee of adjustment?
Yes, I think that material, because as councillors, you don't really see that material. It goes straight to the committee. It may go to the planner. But then it goes to the committee, and so it then could end up at the OMB even, and the council actually doesn't know much about it. So it really should go back to council before it goes off anywhere else.
I'm smiling, and I apologize, not because I find your comment funny. I think it's quite valuable, but I have sat at the council table, and I'm sure some of you may have done this as well, where something comes to council, and the first thing we do is refer it to committee of adjustment, so that we didn't have to deal with it because it was a political hot potato. So I can see this going around and around.
Exactly. So that's why you wouldn't have seen it, because it's been sent off there, so you didn't have to see it.
Well, we saw it. We just decided we didn't want to deal with it.
No, we did. Yeah, it depends on your process whether you actually see it or whether it goes straight there. So, yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. To that point, when a small rural municipality where council members are the Committee of Adjustment. Different story. So we have seen the whole process from start to finish. And I was just wanting to comment, so that wasn't the reason I took my mic. With regard to a local appeal body or having something more grassroots at the municipality in a small rural setting where who do you put on that local body that can remain at arm's length and not have any preconceived notion of you know, not in my backyard or you know, oh, Joe down the road,
the community, the more difficult that becomes.
That's right. So in our group, I expressed, and I think it was agreed, that in certain areas, first of all, the small municipality can't afford its own local appeal board, possibly, but who do you put on it? Yeah. So you have to have an arm's length independent body to go to.
Yes. So I don't think anybody would disagree philosophically with that. What's interesting, I'm kind of hearing though, that, and it was raised, is that there is probably an appetite for a couple of tiers of how this might work, because larger municipalities really face the same situation but from a different angle, and some of the smaller communities, you know, they would need to follow the same policies, etc. I mean, not suggesting that, but the procedures may be adjusted to reflect the smaller communities. Does that make sense? If you have regional representation, you don't need that. So, Tom, you're trying to signal me with something. What is it?
One here.
Okay. We got two more, and then I'm going to wrap it up. It sounds like people are getting a little fidgety.
One here.
One and two. I got it. 1, 2. Right. 1, 2. Rock, paper, scissors. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you very much. On that, this came up in our committee. Why reinvent the wheel? There are committees of adjustment or designates, whether it be council in adjacent municipalities, who are sufficiently knowledgeable enough of your local issues without being directly involved, that could be relied upon to be your appeal body.
Okay, thank you. And our final comment? Oh, man, make it short. Come on.
I just wanted to follow up on the discussion with regards to funding the OMB and the concern with regards to the message coming from this that we need to throw money at the OMB. And I've been kind of mumbling to myself, it's more a matter of reallocating funds than it is throwing more money at them.
Yeah, and I thought it was pretty clear, we weren't just gonna like bury them in dollars.
Absolutely. And then the main point I wanted to make was with regards to the local appeal group or board, I believe that there should be some level of provincial funding to pay for that.
Of course, yes, of course. Yes, that goes without saying, right? That's why we didn't say it. All right, so, really? You want the last word? Go ahead, but you've only got 7. Excellent, well done. She's just reinforced what she's already said. Okay, folks, I'm done. Thank you very much for your time and attention, by the way. I appreciate it, and I wish you nothing but the best of luck. You're going to speak, gents? Wrap it up?
All right, everyone, we'll just wrap up. First of all, I just want to say thank you and extend our thanks to Bill for all his work today. And I wouldn't be remiss if I didn't tell you that Bill would welcome the opportunity to chat with any of you about any of your challenges, whether for facilitation, managing a contentious community meeting, or consulting on some of your municipal issues you may be facing. So once again, thank you, Bill, for the wonderful job and being able to facilitate this for us today.
Handing it over to me?
Just about, almost. So I just once again, I know there are a few people have left already, but I just wanted to make that statement that, that I made earlier when I made my opening remarks, that it's pretty extraordinary and remarkable what's happened here today. We have, elected officials from right across the province that have attended here, have come into Markham about an issue that we all feel passionate about, and that we all know that needs to be some change. And I think that's where we can all agree on. And so I'm going to pass it over to Michael. Michael's going to let us know about the next steps and how we're going to formulate and bring everything together, and how we're going to contact everyone back and continue this movement forward, and hopefully affect that true reform of the OMB. And I'm getting... You're welcome. Thank you. I'm getting the signal from Karen also that when you're leaving, if you could just leave your lanyards and your badges out there, we'll try to reuse them if we can at some point, and try to save the environment, so at the same time. So now, Michael, if you could take it away.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks for your constant emails. I'm sure everybody's appreciative of those over the last 5 months, because it really has been a constant process, and we'd like to say that this is just the beginning. We've had tremendous amount of feedback today, and we're really appreciative of all of everybody's time and efforts coming here and being part of this process. Now the working group has a fair bit of work. Not only do we have to, take in all that feedback, but it looks like we're gonna have a fair bit of time just deciphering Bill's handwriting here. So we'll work on that as well. But the goal always was to bring everybody together and start the process to be able to try to find that consensus, and then bring that feedback back out to everybody. The working group still will decide, I guess, whether we'll do it in the form of a report similar to what some of you may have seen with the Crombie report, or whether, like we have done in the past, a motion or recommendations. But we'll work through that process and get it out to everybody so that you at your local municipalities can decide how you would best want to deal with what the recommendations or suggestions that came out of today's meeting. But then we also want to continue it on. We have a lot of municipalities represented here today, but we know that for geographical reasons and for other commitments, there's still another 300 and some municipalities out there that really didn't get a chance to participate, and we're hopeful that working with AMO that we'll have an opportunity in August in Windsor to also put forward some of the suggestions and ideas that came out of today, so that more municipalities could get on board, and so that when and if that meeting happens with Minister McMeekin, it truly will be a collaborative effort that all of us have put together on what we think should be first and foremost when the reform of the OMB. So stay tuned. There'll be lots of opportunities to continue to participate and be part of the solution in our sense. And look forward to more emails from Tom, because he seems to have everybody's email address in his Outlook book. So. So once again, thank you very much for participating, and there are a few of us will hang around if you have any more questions, but other than that, safe drive home.